how did you cope with the mental side of training? And then on top of that, did you ever seriously consider quitting at any point?
Okay, so I'll answer the second one first. I definitely did consider quitting, I think, at multiple points. I don't think I seriously considered it, in fairness, because there was never... again, I think these tie into each other, don't they? So, like, there was never really ability to say, okay, I'm going to go home having not at least got kicked out kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? It was never going to be my decision. Because I just couldn't face coming back. Because I'd gobbed off about it for a fair amount of time, hadn't I? So if I was going to come back having failed, I thought that was a bit embarrassing. So I used that as a lot of a kind of motivation to stick it out. And in terms of when I felt like quitting, I think just when things felt a little bit impossible, in terms of when maybe the learning curve was increasing a little bit past my ability, or when, for example, I did the 12-mile oat carry and I was absolutely hanging out at the back, thought I was like well below the standard physically. And I was like, if this is going to continue to, because that's like week 20 odd, something like that. So I was like, if this is going to continue to increase, continue to ramp up, I'm like, I'm not there. And so sometimes that gets in your head and you can start to talk yourself out of it.
See, the thing is, like, if the majority of blokes weren't questioning themselves and they weren't consider quitting at some point, I don't think the training process would be doing its job properly.
No, 100%. So like,
because the whole point is that it is a steep learning curve and it is supposed to push you.
We're supposed to select people out. That's the idea, isn't it? So the idea isn't that 60 people start and 60 people finish, because then there's probably, some of those 60 that shouldn't be there, that haven't got
so if
ability.
you haven't got lads that are kind of considering jacking it in,
or actually jacking it in,
then it wouldn't be doing its job, I don't think. So I think that's just normal.
The
difference between the people that continue to do it are the ones that fucking brown out. Are the guys that actually readdress the situation and say, no, like, I'll just have to keep going.
Yeah, it's a couple of things, isn't it? So
you're gonna have to address those mental questions in your head at some point. It's just the people that can shut them down and keep going.
Yeah, so it's the people who can deal with the question of quitting or not quitting and go the right way and take the right path, rather than... Because they'll give you a lot of outs as well during training. Like, they'll say to you, okay, they'll start to paint a little bit of a picture. You'll be on exercise really, really cold and getting thrashed and whatever. Like, you can go home to a warm bed. I can have you there in 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like, all those kind of things. If they see you and like ping you that you're struggling, they'll hone in and they'll be like, okay, fucking recruit Shepherd or whatever. They'll be like, think about it, mate. There's a warm wagon over there. Like they're trying to like get you in. And of course, when you're in that certain state, that can sound really appealing. So like, I told the story I think before, but like, we had one of the exercise Marshall Star pretty early on in training, and you're getting fucked about quite frequently. We had a kit muster, which you have every morning, and the people that fail it get what's called flanked. So if you get on the flank, you're then getting thrashed for like a couple of hours. If you don't get on the flank, so if you pass the kit muster, you get to rest effectively for a few hours. So it's a nice little prof. But the lads who got on the flank because they think we were running a bit late, they saved the thrashing. So we thought they'd forgot. So it's normally directly after the kit muster. They saved it until the evening. So we were like chilling in the harbour area or whatever, and they called us. And they're like, right, fucking 3 ranks on the road if you're on the flank. So we all ran out, and they proceeded to like give us this horrific thrashing in the middle of winter, just up this steep sort of ravine thing. And the main thing they were doing was like lining us up. I don't know if you can imagine, lining us up in the push-up position. So we were like shoulder to shoulder, facing the same way. The person at the bottom of the hill would have to crawl up through the gap that's left in the plank position, and then assume the same position, and that would just go and go and go until you're up the top of the hill. Then you go down, do like hill sprints, all that kind of shit. So at that point, they were like, right, this is going to fucking continue until 2 of you put your notice in. Yeah, so when they say that...
They like doing that, don't they?
Yeah.
Because it's like pitting you against each other.
100%. So when they say that, and you're like, well, if that's fucking true, and everyone here has the same attitude as me, that's not going to happen, we're just here. We're just going for fucking forever.
So to what extent is that true? Do they fully wait for 2 lads to fucking jack it in? Or is it more of a...
It's a ploy.
They're trying to get low-hanging fruit, basically.
Yeah, so it's a ploy, but in the early stages, because you'll still have those blokes that aren't quite there mentally, it will happen. Like, and they know that. When there's like it's week 8, I think Marshall Star, probably a bit further on now, but like, that is pretty early on in the process. You probably still have people who aren't fully invested. And if you aren't fully invested and you're 2.5 hours into a thrashing, you think this is never going to end until I put my notice in. We had like one lad immediately on hearing that was like, yeah, all right, I'll do it. Immediately, mate, completely got in his head.
So I'm guessing that like these ploys that they deploy to try and kind of like thin out the weaker people,
yeah,
they become less frequent as training goes on, because you then become less it becomes less a case of trying to wheedle out the weaklings and actually like at what point, because they've invested a certain amount of time and effort and money into you, do you actually become more of an asset to them when it's about keeping you in?
Yeah, so like particularly in phase 2, that kind of happens. So after week 15, phase 2, that's supposed to be the sort of shift, but there's still that you're always in a training environment, so there's still that thing of, we're going to give you a bit of rope, as in give you a bit of freedom, but fucking hell, don't hang yourself with it. Like, if you take the piss and you start to slack up, you start to like let the standards slip, which happens because you're not fully fledged at that point. And sometimes if the pressure's been applied for 16 weeks and that's been making you perform at a certain level, if that pressure comes off you, you can start to relax a little bit and start to say, okay, I'm not gonna bull my boots this morning, or I'm not gonna iron my whatever my bed sheets. And then if you start to do that and they notice that you're slacking off, then they'll hammer you again. So it's kind of phase 2 and into phase 2. They do start to let up ever so slightly, but there's always that threat of they can bring it down. Like, for example, before final exercise in our training phase, which is like week 27, 28, so super late on, our troop was getting a bit shit. Like lads kept fucking up. They kept being like, you still have inspections all the way through. They kept failing those and just not cleaning stuff, etc. And it built to a certain point where we had like a mud run the day before our final ex, which is fucking horrendous because you've packed all your stuff. Now all your stuff is in the mud in the estuary.
Yeah,
and now you've got to clean it, deservice it. In 12 hours you're deploying, so you're not getting any sleep before a week of getting no sleep. So it's just shocking. And so they can mount this pressure on, and they just know how to fuck with you at that point. They know what works, what doesn't work. Like,
well, we've said this before, haven't we? Like the art of the thrashing.
yeah,
there is an art to it.
100%. There's a massive art, and there's also an art to the threat of the thrashing.
Yeah,
as well. So like,
the linguistics of the threat.
100%. So
knowing when to stick and when to carrot.
Yeah, and they can make it almost feel worse than it is physically, if that makes sense. They can make it feel like it's going to go on for longer, or they can make it feel more intense, whatever. They can single out blokes they want to single out, and that makes, if that's you, that makes you feel at fault for the thrashing, which also plays in your head and thinks, okay, should I be here? Should I be making my lads do this? All that kind of thing. So it's all it is a fine art, and it's knowing whether, okay, is this troop super fit, so a phys thrashing isn't gonna do it, so we're gonna do like an admin thing for him or whatever.
Again, that's part of the art, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
knowing
it's
where your pain points are as a troop.
Yeah, and pushing certain buttons. We had a corporal who was extremely good at that. He was like the spare man. So we had like 3 sections, and every section has a corporal, and then we had an extra one for some reason. I think we had a 4 section, but he was like an extra addition. And he was like a training team veteran, like he'd been on fucking loads of training teams. And he was a savage, mate. He just loved it. And so if he was coming out and it was him who was doing the inspections or whatever, you knew you were in for a fucking good time.